Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back, and if you are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. It's getting close to the end of the year, only a few days left, and over the next few days I have some of my favorite videos for you. Normally I wouldn't do my monthly wrap-up until the beginning of the following month, but all of the best of and top 10 videos are coming up, so today I am doing the final wrap-up of 2021. I read a total of 15 books in December. 7 of those were for the Mondays with Margaret series, which I finished earlier this week, finally. So I won't go over those again, but if you are interested in the Margaret Atwood books, they are the last 7 books that she published, and I will leave links to all of those videos in the description box below, so be sure to check that out. So that leaves me with 8 books left, and as you may remember, I said at the beginning of the year that I would try to read outside my comfort zone, and this year I decided that I would read more romance since it's not a genre that I pick up very often. So I'm going to start with 2 romance novels that I read this month, and the first one is The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. Beth O'Leary is an English author, and this is her debut novel. I had heard so many things about this novel. It got a lot of buzz on Instagram, and I have to say that I didn't like it at first. I felt like it took a lot of time to set up the story. The 2 main characters, Tiffy and Leon, end up sharing a 1-bedroom flat. And the schedule works out for both of them so that neither of them will actually be in the flat during the same time. So just from that premise, I felt like I had a pretty good sense of what was going to happen. And the setup took forever, and I felt like it was explaining everything that is going to happen by telling you that it can't possibly happen. I found that a little condescending, and I was rolling my eyes quite a bit. But Tiffy and Leon don't meet to make the arrangements for the apartment. And at first they are both with other people. They communicate mostly through leaving notes for each other, and that's how they get to know each other. So I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but by the end, it somehow worked out. There was some, very funny parts, and the story did take on the topic of gaslighting in an interesting way. So it's not my favorite romance read of the year, but I think that I will read another Beth O'Leary novel. The second romance I read was Virgin River by Robynn Carr, and this is a first in a series, and this is also a Netflix show. The basic story is that Melinda takes a job as a nurse in the tiny town of Virgin River. She is looking for a new start, but when she arrives, things are not exactly as they were supposed to be. So Melinda decides that, she probably isn't going to stay. This isn't what she expected, but the people in the town are endearing, and there's a baby that Mel wants to make sure, is taken care of. And then there's also Jack, who is the owner of the bar and restaurant in town. Now I have to give a shout out to my friend Leon, hey Leon, who warned me that the book and the series are very different than the show. And if you have watched the Netflix show and you want to read the books, then just a heads up that it's pretty much the same characters, and there are some of the same main events that do happen, but there are also some big and small differences too. I found that their lives are more complicated in the Netflix show. Their backstory is a bit more fleshed out in the show, and in the book, it just felt like things work out more smoothly in some cases. And, I think that this is a good start to a series that I would consider reading more of. But I do think that, as my friend Leon said, it's probably best to think of the book and the series the series show as two different stories. Next up is the second book in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. That I am reading along with A.J. Dunn from A.J. Dunn Reads and Writes, Shelley Swearingen from Shelley Swearingen's Library, and Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, along with Deb and Sonia, who are two just incredible subscribers. So I really enjoyed Bringing Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel, and I enjoyed it more than Wolf Hall. My favorite thing is still Hilary Mantel's writing by far. In fact, I hope to pick up more of her books after finishing this trilogy. And even though I knew this story, about how Anne Boleyn meets her demise and Henry VIII moves on to Jane Seymour, I found the way the story is written very compelling. I really like the character of Thomas Cromwell and how Mantel has written him. Plus, she manages to include humor in the story, sometimes in the most unexpected ways, and I found this book just much easier to follow, even though it still had like a gazillion characters. So it didn't seem for some reason as onerous as in Wolf Hall. And the best part about reading this book is reading it with this group. They've definitely made these reads a lot of fun, and I'm sure that I'm getting more out of the books than I would if I had, read them on my own. We are, I'm trying to think, in a couple of weeks we're beginning the third book in January, so hopefully we will continue enjoying the trilogy. Next up is another debut, The Music of Bees by Eileen Garvin. This was a charming novel. Alice is the protagonist, and she's grieving her husband. She's in a thankless job, and she raises honeybees as a hobby. And when she runs into Jake with her pickup truck, she finds herself intrigued by him. And Jake is in a wheelchair. He is my favorite character in the book. His home life is not great. His father is very cruel to him. So Jake finds reprieve when Alice invites him to her farm. And he becomes interested in Alice's bees, and it turns out is a real natural with them. Alice also hires Harry to work at the farm, and Harry has an interesting background too. And although he wasn't my favorite character, I really liked the friendship that he has with Jake. So these three characters are, trying to figure out how to carry on when they have all lost so much, and life is not what they were hoping that it would be. They find friendship with each other, and they kind of become a chosen family. So this is a pretty quick read. It has a hopeful message about, friendship and healing, and plus you learn a bit about bees along the way. The next book was delightful. October Jones' The Lightning Pines Mystery by J.D. McFarren, who the BookTube community knows as A.J. Dunn. I adored this story. This is a middle grade book, and I don't often read middle grade stories, but I was so glad to have had the opportunity to read this one. Oh my goodness, I'm losing all my books. October Jones is about 10 years old and gets in trouble at school for not always paying attention. And when there's a vandalism at the local cemetery, and October thinks that he knows who did it. And with a little bit of help from his friends and even his older sister, they attempt to, solve this mystery. And I just thought that this was a smart and entertaining read. I mentioned in my book haul video that this book is unfortunately no longer in print, but AJ is working on a new book, and if the writing in this book is any indication of what's to come, then I don't think we will be disappointed. Next up is a non-fiction book that somehow seemed appropriate to read at the end of this crazy year. Notes on Grief by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This past year, my family has experienced a tremendous amount of loss, and I still find it hard to believe. I think we lost about 12 or 13 family and friends. and it's been so overwhelming. So this book, although, you know, I've known about it since it was first published and it's been, you know, on my radar, I think that it came into my life at the right time. Chimamanda writes about her father, his death, and how she and her family grieved during the pandemic. And I love Adichie's writing, and I find her nonfiction to be incredible. She has a way of saying something so profound in just a few words, but it pierces your heart. And that was true when she talked about her own grief and the immense feelings of that grief. And I could definitely relate to a lot of what she said. You know, when I think about my own father, and I think back on grieving for him, and he died over 16 years ago, but that feeling is still very much, you know, part of who I am. So if you were looking for a book that talks about grief and loss in a very honest and raw way, then this might be a good choice. The final two books I have to share are both Canadian authors. Of course, I have to have some Canadians on the list. The first is a debut. It's Ghost Forest by Pik-Shuen Fung. And the story is written in brief vignettes that kind of give snapshots or fragments into the life of a Chinese-Canadian family. There are no characters named. We only know them by relationship to the narrator. And the narrator is a young girl when the story begins, and her family immigrates from Hong Kong to Canada. Her father is what they call an astronaut father, meaning that he is working in Hong Kong and the family only sees him, you know, once or twice a year. So this distance causes distance in their personal relationships. And the novel is fiction, but in many ways it reads like a memoir. One of the main focuses is the relationship between the narrator and her father. And we never really get an in-depth look into the characters, especially at first. It seems that the story itself kind of stays surface level, but the writing is quite moving, and I'm going to say the spaces on the page, I think, are just as important as the content and what we do learn. The writing is different than anything that I've read, and it's quite beautiful. It's a story about the dynamics of a family, a story of culture, immigration, forgiveness, and grief, and it's definitely a promising debut. The final book I finished in 2021 was another nonfiction book, Field Study, Meditations on a Year at the Herbarium by Canadian author Helen Humphreys. This is the first, is it? Yes, this is the first nonfiction that I've read of Humphreys. And I have to say that just the book alone is beautiful. It's divided into 4 sections based on the seasons of the year. And Humphreys talks about her experience at the Fowler Herbarium. She talks about the herbarium as a forest and tries to show the intersection between nature and people. She talks about different botanists and how each one has their own style and how their personalities show in their notes. And I like when she talked about drawing the flowers. Mostly what I enjoyed about the book was how well it was put together with the different pictures. I'll show you some of those. It was just done so well, and it was an enchanting experience to read. I'll show you a couple more here. There we go. I will give you a heads up that Humphreys does talk about the death of their dog and what that experience was like, and their journey through that. But if you enjoy reading about nature, particularly flowers, then this might be an enjoyable read for you as well. So that finishes up all the books that I read in December. Please let me know if you have read any of these or if you are interested in any of them. I would love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned tomorrow for my final top 10 books of 2021, where I talk about the best books that I read from September to December. And you can see if any of these make it into that list. Thanks again for watching. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.